Happy Independence Day. So, I'm on my way. I'm getting ready. First I'm going to head home, but then I'm going to go to a party. It's 4th of July, and we're going to a birthday party. We have lots of birthdays around this time. So, today I want to do a video about... I tried to do this video once already, and I'm redoing it because it got too dark. The video went too long, and the video got too dark to be very good quality. I really want to talk about my experience with changing schools, okay? I've taught for 6 years, and in that amount of time, I've taught at 4 different schools, okay? And that's a lot. It has been very stressful, but I finally feel like I'm at a school where I'm going to be very happy, okay? We'll see what happens. I mean, you can never make any promises with these things. Time marches forward and things change, and things don't always last, but I think this one will, okay? So I do want to talk about why I changed schools each time that I did and what I learned from each experience, because I think each one did kind of teach me a different lesson, okay? And maybe by talking about it, I can help another teacher kind of navigate the difficulties that come with trying to change schools. And every person in every school, every person's going to have different priorities, and every school is going to meet those needs in different ways, okay? And so my experience, you can't do exactly what I did, because what I did only works for me and where I am at in my life, okay? Not everyone is able to change schools like I was able to do. Like I couldn't change states, whereas some other people may be able to change states, right? And so it's just important that, I don't necessarily want to call this a disclaimer, but I just want you to, you can't do things in exactly the same way I did, and I'm not saying that all of the things that I did were even... I think it was good that each time that I changed schools, I had very good reasons, but I think through my experience, you may be able to take a few notes and think through, okay, why do I want to change schools? Is this the best time for me? Just, I really do think that, you're not going to be able to copy and paste what I did at all, right? I made mistakes. But I do think that through successes and through failures, lessons can be learned from both sides of the story, right? So, and I hope that by sharing this experience, I will save other teachers a lot of time and worrying and grief that maybe I went through, right? So that's kind of my introduction to this video. I suspect it's going to be kind of long. I'm going to make it shorter than my last one, but I'm going to end it here because I'm almost home, and then I will restart the video when I'm on my way to the party, so that I can have enough time to really dig deep into each school why did I leave each school, what I was leaving and what I was going toward, and what lessons I learned from each experience. Okay, see you soon. Okay, I'm back. So, the first school, I went to college I got a bachelor's and a master's, and I got certified to teach 6 through 12. And originally, I had intended to be a high school teacher. So, I did my methods in student teaching at the high school that I was later hired at, and I ended up leaving in the middle of the year, at the December mark. I changed schools. And there were a lot of reasons for that, but one of the things when I look back on teaching high school at this particular high school, I realized that I made a lot of mistakes, right? And I think I think I had good reasons to leave, but I also know that I made a lot of mistakes, and there were just a lot of factors that kind of went against me, that went against my ability to do well right off the bat, right? So I was very close to their age group when I first started teaching. I was like 23, 24, or something like that. So, which is not that far off from a high schooler's age. What else? I also, wasn't experienced managing behavior or preventing behaviors from happening. And I also, because of my age, it made it hard for them to probably respect me in a lot of ways, or, and then I also was bad at, now this is before the curriculum they have now, but I felt like, now that I look back, I feel like the assignments I was giving them was not, either it wasn't reasonable, or I was asking too much. I was back in college, they teach us, I went to college to learn how to be a teacher, right? And I was so strict on the things I had been taught about rubrics and grading and everything, and I was not very flexible. I was always expecting like top-notch work in every assignment, right? When really assignments kind of fluctuate, and really when you're grading, you can focus on a particular skill rather than on all things, right? Not everything needs to be graded according to the most elaborate rubric, right? And frankly, not everything has to be graded. Just because a kid, writes something on a piece of paper doesn't mean it has to be graded. Now, if you're asking them to do a whole lot of work and put a whole lot of effort into something, then yes, grade something that they've put a lot of effort into. But that was one of the mistakes I made when I was back then. I was so strict on what I thought I had to do to be a good teacher, and trying to hold them to these standards that were not reasonable. Expecting these extensive paragraphs on these little study guides I was giving out, all kinds of mistakes I was making. And then, of course, they didn't do the work, right? I was having unreasonable expectations for every single assignment, and then they weren't doing the work. And so it was just frustrating. It was a just not a good situation, right? I wasn't being a very good teacher. I wasn't creating engaging assignments, all of the things. So I think if I were to do high school now, I would be much better at it, just because I'm a better teacher and I have more experience in general, right? Nevertheless, I did leave because of that and some other reasons, right? Let's see, I left in the middle of the year, and I went toward virtual school. Now, I think it was good in a way that I left, because it was kind of the first time I chose to leave a school, and it really showed me that I could keep searching until I found a good one, right? And looking back, 6 years later, I can say, for those of you who are looking into teaching and you're thinking about teaching high school, just realize that it will take time, right? It'll take at least, a lot of experienced teachers will say, at least you'll finally get your feet out from under you around, at the 4-year, 5-year mark, okay? You'll start being able to get your sea legs after the 4 or 5 year mark, okay? Make sure to always, and I feel like other teachers were trying to tell me to relax. I was working myself really, really hard and really, really late for many, many years, not just at this school, but at other schools, and it just wasn't necessary. So that's one of the things I learned at each of these schools, is that you really can make the job work for you, right? Every school is going to have its different curriculum, its different requirements and policies and how many grades you have to have in the grade book every grading period and what kinds of assignments you have to have. But you can certainly make those assignments, and you can make those things work for you within the time you're willing to give to your job, right? I was working till like 10 p.m. every night. And over the years, and it's just not necessary. You're going to burn yourself out that way. You have to, ask those around you how they make the job work for them, where they're willing to allocate their time, and what's important to them, okay? And just as much as possible, seek advice and try to use the technology to your advantage. You do anything you can to cut time out. Put in the time during your planning period. Don't just goof off or talk to other teachers. You may just have to sit in your own room by yourself and not socialize during your planning period so that you can actually get the work done, your grading done, so you don't have to take it home. Only assign things that are meaningful, right? Or if it's not meaningful, then don't ride the kids really hard about doing a non-meaningful assignment, right? Just think about when you're assigning things, is this something I later want to grade? And is it worth assigning and grading and forcing these kids to get it done? And what skill are you really grading it for, right? Some things you may want to focus on the language, mechanics, and other things you may just want to say, did they get the right answer, okay? Just make the job work for you. It is possible. I see, and I've felt this way, right? At every job, I have felt like I wanted to quit. At every job, I've thought, what other careers can I do? But, and it, especially because of this year, it's especially hard. But now that I'm at my current job, I really feel like this is a job I think I can do for the next 30 years, right? So you have to think of the long-term goal, which is to be able to do this job for the next 30 years. At least in our state, you cannot get the retirement unless you do the job for 30 years. So start implementing the things that will long-term be functional for you and practical for you. Working till 10 p.m. for me was not practical. Okay, so that means that I have to grade with that in mind. I have to plan with that in mind. That, my priorities are that family comes first, that I don't burn out, that the kids have a good experience, that they enjoy coming to my classroom, right? And a safe environment, all of those things. Think about your priorities and then make the job work for those priorities, right? So I left this particular job for good reasons, and maybe also because of an experience. And I went that was teaching at a high school in person. I went toward teaching at a virtual school, okay? And this was before the pandemic, 100% online virtual school, and like 9th through 12th grade level, right? And that was a completely different teaching experience, okay? And again, I think there were things that I could have done better with that job. Looking back, okay, there were things that I could have done that might have allowed me to have stayed with that job. And then there were things that, again, every time I always had very good reasons to leave. And I'm probably anybody out there who can find lots of good reasons to leave their current job, right? The question is, do the benefits outweigh the drawbacks? So with the virtual school, again, there are lots of reasons I left, but with virtual teaching, you have to realize that it's a very different kind of teaching experience. So I only taught 2 to 4 times a week, okay? And the rest of the time is allocated toward planning and grading and supplementing lessons. And again, every virtual school may be different, right? This is my experience at this one virtual school. Not all virtual schools will be the same, just like all public schools are not the same. Just like all private schools are not the same. Every school is going to have its own way of doing things, but this is the way our virtual school did things, okay? So the rest of the time is allocated toward planning and grading, okay? And you had a very heavy load. You had like around 200 students, and you had a lot of grading going on, okay? And also, there's a lot of phone calls happening because you have your homeroom students where you have to call like around 30 or more students to motivate them to get the work done, right? When you're in person, you have a personal connection with these students and you understand what motivates them, and you're more able to implement what motivates them in person, right? Whether it be physical rewards or more assignments that motivate them, Go Noodle or more time at recess. I mean, there's lots of things you can do in a classroom that can get kids motivated, okay? And you have that personal connection, and that alone sometimes is enough. Like, you sit there and you listen to them get excited about their artwork or their story that they wrote or their anime or whatever interests them, and that alone kind of develops this connection with them that motivates them to do the work for you. Well, when you're a virtual teacher, you don't have that connection, and you make these phone calls and you try to develop that connection, but it's just not the same. And I struggled very deeply with the fact that a lot of my students weren't working, and I felt very helpless, right? And that was something that was very hard for me to overcome, right? To feel that helpless, and from the majority of my job to not be teaching the kids, but trying to motivate them to do the work when I have very, very little resources to actually help them, like other than talking to them and explaining the assignment and calling them, which I taught high schoolers. They didn't want to be bothered. A lot of the high schoolers that I taught were working, right? They were holding jobs. So I can't blame them, right? They have lots of priorities at that age. But it was just, I felt so helpless, and I felt like such a failure. Like, I just felt like so many of my students are failing because they're not motivated, and I felt helpless because I couldn't motivate them, and so I just felt like a failure as a teacher. And I just couldn't get over that, and so that was one of the main reasons, not the only reason. There were lots of reasons, but that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to leave. There were huge benefits, right? Being able to pee, go to the restroom whenever I wanted, and have a lunch break, right? Like, have a long, hour-long lunch break. I mean, that's magical. Being able to go to the restroom or go eat for an hour is like unheard of in the teaching profession. And so those are things that are, really great benefits. But, I couldn't. At the end of the day, among other reasons, it wasn't enough to make me want to stay. And I have to say, at each of these jobs, I really had a good experience with my coworkers. That's not always true with the higher ups, but with my coworkers, the other teachers I was with, I was always very happy with my coworkers. So it made it very hard to leave every school. And I'll talk more about that at the end of the video. Maybe I'll do a third video talking about kind of what I've learned overall. But it was very hard to leave every school. There was a lot of guilt. I felt really bad. I was always worried. When I decided I wanted to leave, it was very hard to search for a new job, to do the interview, to put in the resignation, decide to accept the job, whether or not to accept the job, then put in the resignation letter, and then move all of my stuff. It was very stressful. I felt very guilty, especially leaving it in the middle of a semester or a year. In the middle of a year was, there was just a lot of guilt and shame around all of that, which I wish I hadn't felt that way back then, right? Each time I felt that way. And now that I'm so happy at my most recent school, I wish I hadn't felt that way, right? Now that I finally found the place where I'm going to be happy, it's like, oh, I shouldn't have worried. I mean, the job will move on without you. It doesn't need you. It will find somebody else. And so don't ever be ashamed to go hunt for your dream job, right? I really wish I had not wasted all of my energy and time worrying about such things when they really didn't. I wasn't a priority to them anyway, right? Not that they were ever mean to me, not that it was at me, but that's just business, right? And so you just really gotta stop worrying about such things. So I left the virtual school, and the virtual school was a charter school, and I changed from a virtual high school charter school to an in-person brick and mortar elementary school charter school. And that was a huge change. I went from high school to elementary. I went from like teaching 10th grade-ish to teaching third and fourth grade English and social studies, right? So I'm certified to teach English, and I've been teaching English this whole time, but I went to this charter school and taught elementary charter school and taught third and fourth English and social studies for a year. And that was a very hard transition for me. With third grade, you have to be a lot slower and gentler and kinder, right? And the things you teach a third grader are so different than the things you teach a high schooler. I think I'm very happy I did switch to elementary, because I never would have tried it. If I hadn't made this jump, I never would have tried elementary. I never would have thought someone would hire me for elementary when I wasn't certified for that, right? I'm barely, I am an expert in English, right? And this particular school is meant to be very, very advanced. That's why they hired me, is because they want that advanced level at these lower grade levels, right? With that kind of end in mind. But with third graders, their processing is so much slower. It takes them a lot longer to do anything you ask them to do. And you really have to mind what you say and how you say things. And it's a whole nother level, and making sure not to say things that might hurt their feelings, or it's just, you have to think on a whole nother level with third graders. And I'll never do it again, but I really like third grade, because the hugs and the sweetness and the little love notes they'll write you, it's just the sweetest thing. Third graders are so sweet. I'll never teach it again, because it's just, the level is just, the things you have to teach, the curriculum, right, you have to teach is so very different. You're focusing mainly on spelling, language mechanics, and at least at this particular school, again, each school will be different, but for this level, there's spelling, language mechanics, and they're just like starting to write sentences and paragraphs. Just start like entering that field. And but fourth grade I really like. I won't do third grade again, but fourth and I say that, never say never, but fourth and fifth, so I taught third and fourth grade I really liked. I liked the literature too, right? Third grade literature was good, but fourth grade literature is probably one of my favorites. And then the following year I taught fourth and fifth. I actually moved up with my students, and I taught fourth and fifth just English, which I really, really do like. Fourth and fifth is like my favorite grades probably of all. And I just realized that's one of the things I learned from this experience, is that I really like, children's literature. I really like young adult literature, right? I taught, of course, again, we're teaching at very high level to these kids, but we taught Bridget Terabithia. My fourth graders did Bridget Terabithia. One year I did The Tale of Despereaux, although I didn't do that the following year because I thought it was too much in a year. Island of the Blue Dolphins and Number the Stars, right? And I love those books. I love that level and age, and they're just introducing these huge ideas and themes and historical context that they have never heard of before. I mean, man, it was shocking to me to realize that I'm the first. When you're teaching 4th grade and you're doing Number the Stars, they're hearing about the Holocaust for the first time from me, which was a huge responsibility and weight that maybe I wasn't really prepared for, because I didn't realize that they're so young that they obviously haven't been introduced to this idea yet. And so that was a huge responsibility that I really wasn't ready for, but now I just love that literature, and now that I've gotten the hang of it, I'd love to teach that again. And I would have stayed with this school if not for a few other reasons. But 5th, I also love. We did Esperanza Rising. Last year we did Esperanza Rising, The Hobbit, which was maybe a little hard for them just because of the length, but man, it was one of my favorites to teach. And then we did, what was the other book? Lord have mercy, I can't remember. There's another book I can't remember, but anyway, I just love that. I just love children/young adult literature, which I didn't realize when I first went and got my college degree and I was going to be a high school teacher. As much as I like that classic adult literature, right? I had to do Great Gatsby one year, or Fahrenheit 451, or I do really like those books, okay? But there's just something special about teaching these themes in these children's books and introducing these ideas for the first time to these kids. And with elementary, for me, I love teaching elementary because of how these kids are so invested. They're so interested. They have a hunger for knowledge, right? That high schoolers, some of them have, but not a lot, right? High schoolers are kind of wrapped up in whatever the next milestone is going to be for them, right? They're just trying to get out of high school and go to college. Like, they're just trying to move on with their life. And a lot of this stuff that you teach at a high school level, they may or may not be able to use in their career, right? That's just the way it is. I still think it's important, but I mean, that's the way it is. But with elementary, you're really teaching these important, again, I did a lot of language mechanics and paragraph writing, and you're introducing these ideas, and they have this hunger, it's hard to get them to sit still. I have to say that. It's hard to get them to sit still. They are just bouncing out of their chairs. But they love, like, if you're interested in the topic and the learning and the history, they're learning all of this stuff for the first time. It's absolutely interesting to them. And that's what I just love about elementary and 4th and 5th grade. You're introducing these really huge ideas for the first time. And it's just, wonderful. And then this past year, I had to teach 4th, 5th, and 6th. Now, this was a small charter school, so I was the only one teaching these subjects, and that was the huge drawback, and that's when I realized I needed to leave this particular school, is because I was teaching multiple grade levels. They didn't provide a whole lot of support of well-developed curriculum. A lot of it was the responsibility of the teachers to create, right? This particular charter school has a network of schools all over the U.S., and they really put a lot of responsibility on the teacher to create a lot of the stuff and have it aligned to the state standards and Common Core, right? Which was overburdening to me. I spent a lot of time on Teachers Pay Teachers for that reason. The reason I mainly discovered and used Teachers Pay Teachers was because it was just too much for me to develop a whole curriculum for multiple grade levels all by myself, because there were no other English teachers teaching these grades. Now, I did get some support with 5th grade this past year, but I decided to leave because each year I was kind of developing and I didn't create, but I often would purchase or use stuff already developed that looked good and it was aligned to the standards. and was rigorous, okay? Better than anything I could put together overnight, right? Over these past few years. But when we had to do 4th, 5th, and 6th, and with the COVID rules, we had to teach in person and virtual at the same time. Like at first everyone was virtual, but then we all had to, about in last September-ish, October, we all had to be, the people who chose to be in person were, but we teachers had to teach both at the same time, like during school, like go live in person. And we have very maxed out classes, 36 kids per class. A lot of kids, a lot of grading. And all the teachers at this school were very, very hardworking. But this school required at least an hour-long faculty meeting every week for the past couple years. And then this year, we had to do an extra hour-long grade level team meeting. So that means 2 hour-long meetings a week after school, and it was not in the same town that I lived, so I had to drive such a long period, so long to get home really, really late. Okay, I had to leave really, really early to miss traffic and leave late due to all the meetings, and our school didn't have a bus system; it was carpool only, so that we had to help with carpool. Okay, so when you're thinking about looking at schools, either your first school or the next school you want to go to, some of the questions you need to be asking. This is one of the things I learned with this school. There were questions that I should have asked about this school that I didn't when I first took the job, or I didn't investigate deeply enough, right? So this is the huge thing I should have asked was, I did ask about their curriculum, but I didn't do a deep investigation into what was provided, which was not much. And in this past year, they've added a lot more, but a lot of it didn't apply because that wasn't the books I was using, right? So, that was a big issue, was that you have to ask, like, what are the materials? Show me the materials. It's not enough to say you have the materials, show it to me. I want to see all of it, because if it's not there, I'm not going to allow these kids to fail. I'm going to do what it takes so that they get something, and make sure that I'm doing my job, right? So that was one of the mistakes I made. And then the carpool thing, like, you need to ask about the extra responsibilities that are required to, usually you have duty. A lot of schools, teachers have duty, like lunch duty or carpool duty or whatever. But this particular school ended really late, and the carpool went really late because it wasn't a very good area for carpool. Very complex to handle all of that. And then the extra hour-long, 1 to 2 hour-long faculty meetings a week. You have to ask all those questions. Do you have faculty meetings? How often are they? How long are they? I kept getting promised that these wouldn't be that each year that they would stop doing that as often, and then they never did, right? And then it got longer and worse, not better. And then drive, right? That's not really a question for them to answer. That's really a question you really need to think hard about. I should have been looking more in town, especially since I was planning to have a kid anyway. But I had to do the hour-long drive when I was at a virtual school, right? Which is ironic. You would think you'd work from home, but some days we worked from home and some days we didn't, right? So that's a question you need to think about if you're going with a virtual school. Do you have an office? How often do you have to go in? And we did have to go in like 3 days a week when it wasn't COVID, for the virtual school. And it was an hour-long drive, but it really didn't matter because it wasn't a stressful day for me when I was teaching at the virtual school. But it did matter when I was teaching in person at the elementary school. That extra hour-long drive after a very stressful day and working all morning. I would get to work at like 6 a.m. I would leave at 5 a.m. from home to get at 6 a.m. to work it, plan and make copies until school started at 7 or 8, right? That's the kind of time I had to put in because there wasn't just a curriculum there. So I decided to leave this school, and I had put in my resume to the parish where I live over the summer, but I didn't get any bites. And so I stayed at this school for a semester until someone gave me a call in the area that I live, and I've taken that job, and I'm glad, because I realize my priorities are not burning out and being able to go home, and the school I was at was not conducive to not burning out and to not getting home on time, right? And so you have to think about what are your priorities, and does the school that you're looking at align with those priorities? Obviously, they're not going to have your priorities in mind, but can they align with your priorities? And if you can interview some teachers or talk to those who already work there. I didn't have that opportunity because of COVID. I couldn't go in and interview teachers or whatever, but I just made the choice because I was so burnt out and overburdened. I was at the end of my rope, and so I was so miserable. As much as I loved the kids, and as much as I loved the grade level that I teach, and as much as I loved the literature I was teaching, even though it was a ton of work, it just wasn't enough to keep me at that school because of the drive time, because of the extra hours I had to do after school, orientation meetings that would go till 7 or 8. I wouldn't get home till 8 or 9 p.m. because of orientation meetings that this charter school would do. It was just a lot. And so you have to think about, and you also have to think about the grade level, right? So if you're looking at schools, that's one of the other things I learned, is you need to really look at the curriculum. What are they asking you to teach for this grade level? If you're trying to decide what grade do I want to teach, you have to ask or look up or find what curriculum they're going to be asking you to teach, because that's going to make a big difference in your teaching, how pleasant it's going to be for you. For me, third grade was just not the kind of stuff I wanted to teach, right? I didn't want to do spelling tests and stuff. I didn't want to do all that. I didn't want to do this or that or the other. You have to really look at the curriculum, and that's really going to help you determine what grade level you want to teach. And some of these things you'll only learn through experience. You won't know how you feel about it until you do it, and then you'll realize. Or the age level. You won't know, if this age is for you until you try it. That's probably why they say it takes you 4 or 5 years to get your sea legs, because it takes that long to figure out what grade you like and what you don't. And for me, elementary, I really like it because it's easier for me to teach, right? Some of those high schoolers are, really, really smart, which is great. But you really have to be thinking hard and on a high level which, not a big deal. Wasn't a big deal when I was teaching high school, but you really have to read a lot of essays when you're doing high school, and it just wasn't worth it for me, With 5th grade, they're just learning how to write essays, which are not that long and kind of formulaic and really easy to grade. You have to go a lot more in depth with high school students, right? There's a lot more involved with high school students and essays. And you just have to decide, what do I want to teach? What am I willing to grade? What topics are interesting to me? What literature interests me as far as teaching goes, right? I would prefer to talk about the lessons and the morals and the themes, which is great for the age level for 5th grade, for 4th and 5th, right? Whereas with high school, there's a lot more, I think, technical aspects. There is, I think there is a lot of discussion, high level discussion in the high school level, but I always felt like we never had time for that stuff, right? The best part of teaching high school, I felt like we never had time for, but that may be different depending on the school and your ability to sneak it in and get to the good stuff. Again, I wasn't experienced. Maybe if I taught it now, I would do a better job at being able to get to the good parts. Again, make the job work for you. Do the things you like. It is possible to create assignments or lessons that are geared toward the kinds of things you enjoy teaching. It is possible. Or supplemented with the things you enjoy. So I went to my new school, and it really checks all the boxes for me, as far as aligning with my priorities, right? My priorities are family. And so, and having support. And so at my new school, I have other teachers who also teach 5th grade. I didn't have that at my previous charter school, because I was the only one who taught that grade level, except for that one semester. I was mostly on my own. And so with this new, my new job, I teach 5th grade, and I have like 3 or 4 other English teachers who can help me create the supplemental material. That's just a huge deal, right? That I'm not on my own, that I don't feel like I'm alone in this, and that I'm failing my kids, right? And we can all kind of commiserate together if the kids don't do well on something, right? It doesn't feel like I'm failing them. It just feels like, oh, we didn't do great on that. We can do better and help each other and make up for each other's, lacking, right? We can fill in each other's gaps. It's wonderful. So it really helps my self-esteem. And the other thing with this new job is I have so many less kids. Previously, I had like 180 or 90 at my previous school, and at this new one, I only have, because I taught, for a couple of years I taught 4 classes, and then last year I taught 5 classes. At this new school, I only have 3 classes for like 90 minutes, and it's supposed to be like blocks of like language and literature, and I have this year, because of COVID, I didn't have to teach any of the virtual kids, and I only taught the in-person kids, and we only had about 20 kids in person per class. So that's 60 kids in total, and for an English teacher, that's a big deal. You have to think about like the class sizes. Every kid added to your class is like another thing you have to grade, right? It's another relationship you have to create. It's another behavior you have to manage, and so every kid is going to add to your to-do list, right? And so I went from 180 or 90 kids to 60, 40, 60, right? That's a huge deal, huge time saver. I felt like I didn't have to grade till 10 p.m. and I didn't have to get up early at 5 a.m. to start planning for the day. Because also, this school provides, the state, it's a public school, the state provides this curriculum, very detailed lesson plans, very detailed. Good, bad, or ugly, they're very detailed, right? They're not always none of us, we don't all like everything that we teach, but we can always supplement and fill in those gaps, or supplement and modify in ways that make it more doable, right? And that's wonderful, and it's great, and we can help each other out with that, with our team, our English team. So, less kids, less classes, I leave work earlier and I get home sooner because I live in town. So all of those things are really aligning with my priorities in a way where I go home and I basically don't have to worry about it till I go back to school the next day, right? And I'm just so much happier for it, right? If I had chosen to not take the risk, I wouldn't have gotten the reward, okay? And so that's what I will say. Are we almost how many minutes you think? 3? Oh. I think I'll do a separate video because we're almost at the party, but I do want to talk about I do want to talk about some of the things I've learned overall from this experience. But from this last school, I will say I'm glad I took the risk. It was hard every single time, but it was worth it in the end. And I see a lot of teachers who are quitting, all on my news feed, all on YouTube, all these videos of teachers quitting. And I've felt that way. But I didn't give up. I wanted to give up. I tried to give up. My husband wouldn't let me give up. And but I really finally felt like I'm at a job where I can be happy for the, every day's that doesn't mean my days aren't going to be hard and long, but I'm finally at a job where this is doable. I'm not miserable when I wake up every morning, and it is possible and doable. You just have to be willing to take the risk. There is no risk to looking. There is no risk to doing interviews, right? There's no risk to talking to other schools and principals, right? At the very least, if you're unhappy, first think about why you're unhappy. Think about your priorities. Think about, can you make the job work for you, and can you like overlook the things that make you unhappy, right? Definitely see if you can make your current job work, right? I think I could have made the high school work, but I was too inexperienced to know better. I think I could have made the virtual school work, although I did have I was deeply unsettled by the fact that I didn't feel like I was failing my kids. So I don't know if I could have ever gotten over that. Who knows, right? I can't turn back and change that decision anyway. But definitely think through why you're unhappy. Can you make the job work for you? And if you can't, if you're deeply unsatisfied, this is something that you can't get over, you can't get around, you can't modify to make it fit your situation, make sure your resume is always updated. Be willing to look around, because there's no, especially since a lot of teachers are women, a lot of us don't like the idea of the insecurity of looking for, going to another job is like economically feels very insecure, right? It doesn't feel safe, right? But you have to be willing to look, because there's no risk to that. There's no risk to an interview. And then if you hear something that's like, I don't know if this is better or not, you don't have to take it. You don't have to accept whatever job they offer you, or maybe the pay isn't enough or whatever. Always be thinking about the risk versus the benefit. And if it looks like it could be a huge benefit, make a decision, right? That's what I will say is, I kind of want to, I got like 1 second left, but I spent so much time worrying about my indecisiveness, right? I spent so much time, I had so much guilt and so much worry and so much stress because I was indecisive. Stop being indecisive. Make a decision, right? And don't look back. I can't look back at the virtual school because it's gone, right? I can't look back at my high school. It's gone, right? Do your research, do your investigation. Don't be lazy. But once you've decided whether to stay or go, don't look back. And if the new job doesn't work out, keep looking. Or if you decided to stay, you can wait a while, see if things get better, and if it doesn't, you can look again later. No big deal, right? So all of that to say is, I hope this experience and me describing everything that I've gone through, I hope all of that information will help you kind of make a better decision in your life, right? My mistakes in my schools or my successes, right, will be different than whatever your situation is. But if you think about like the lessons that I've learned with the kinds of questions that I should have asked, and the idea with keeping it in mind that you should, as much as possible, try to make wherever your job is, try to make it work for you. I hope these things will help give you some perspective, and maybe help you avoid any mistakes that I made, and maybe make a more informed or better decision for you. And again, your priorities will be different than mine, but I hope my experience will maybe help you avoid any mistakes that I have made, right? All right, that's it. I'm here at the party, so I hope you have a good day. Happy Independence Day. Bye.